Hey, everybody, welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thanks so much for joining us as we talk about romance scams. This is a fascinating topic, and it's very wide-reaching. I know that it has affected people in my own life, my own circle of friends and family, people who are out there looking for companionship and connection, but wind up being victims of scams. Our guest tonight is an expert in this field, but also an expert in many other areas. He's a special agent in charge of the Portland FBI office. His work in the FBI has also spanned hostage recovery, counterterrorism. He was part of the team, and in fact led the team that led the Boston Marathon bombing task force to its conclusion. Joining us live now on That Expert Show is Special Agent in Charge Kieran Ramsey. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Ramsey.
Anna, thanks so much for having me tonight. It's a real treat.
This is an important episode that I hope that if you're watching this, you'd be willing to share it with your family and friends, because you never know who in your circle has fallen victim to this kind of scam. And it is so emotional and so psychological. Can you explain for us how romance scams have dovetailed with your work in the FBI and how the scope and impact of these scams has skyrocketed?
Sure. Romance scams sadly have been around for hundreds of years, but what we see now is romance scams online, and it's really been a booming business, sadly, for those perpetrating it. We see this evolution to where people are desperate in one sense, or just needing human connection in another. If we think as we come out of this pandemic for the last 2 years, people are really craving connection with humans in any way they can. And oftentimes, given that we live on an online or virtual world, it really opens up the possibility for us to find romance. But sadly, romance online also has a deep downside. The basics of the romance scam are the fact that somebody is out there trying to tug at your heartstrings. They try and make that human connection with you, try and get you to be extremely endearing to them or them to you. And then ultimately, there comes an ask for money. And that money is for fraudulent purposes. Their intent is to steal your money and to leave you not only financially devastated, but financially or heartbroken as well, just in a personal, emotional sense. If I explain to you the scale of it, you're going to be quite surprised. For last year alone, in 2021, the FBI took in some 24,000 complaints into what's called our Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is how we receive tips online. And the losses for these complaints totaled over $950 million, nearly $1 billion with a B, in financial losses in this scam. So it is, unfortunately, a widespread problem. And unfortunately, it has really dire consequences, both financially and psychologically and emotionally.
And the reality is, that near $1 billion is probably a gross underestimate, because the nature of this crime being what it is, victims are probably embarrassed, and most of them probably don't come forward and report it.
We know without a doubt that there is underreporting by an X factor percentage. This is a very personal, very private issue that impacts people, and extremely embarrassing. And when you think about the fact that people that are well educated, that are fairly savvy, can fall victim as easily as anybody else. And we see this time again. And again, this is not a new scam. It's been evolving over years. For the FBI alone, we've been doing public service awareness messages on this since 2015. It really shows you, the victimization of people that occurs at the hands of these individuals that conduct this type of scam.
What did the pandemic do to these types of reports? Because I can imagine with the isolation, that only made things worse for victims.
I believe so. We saw an increase, by way of example, in the overall reporting about internet crimes. There was an uptick in reporting from 2020 to 2021 by about 7%. Now, I'll give you a couple of numbers. Our Internet Crime Complaint Center, on average, gets about 550,000 complaints each year. And then for 2021, we had over 840,000 complaints. Now, that's not all romance scams. That runs the gamut of investment and finance scams, business email compromise, romance scams, what have you. But what I think we see here, and while this is maybe anecdotal at this point, but I'm sure with further time and analysis will show that because the pandemic caused such an isolation amongst people across our entire community, across the entire country, it really put people at risk. And unfortunately, again, people were waiting in the wings, quite literally just waiting there to victimize people. And again, use their expertise to really calm these people and out of so much.
Is the typical framework for this some kind of dating app or dating website, of which there are so many now, it's hard to even keep track?
It is. It can often start on any variety of the dating sites. I'll give you a couple of numbers as well. So for last year, we saw approximately 361 complaints come in about Match.com. We had another 690 complaints about Tinder. I know, and it's not to single those two apps out at all by any means. There are any number of apps out there. So it ran the gamut across the various apps. And what happens is you'll notice a common trend. People will meet on these apps. They'll start in those, fairly public forums of the apps that are being used. But slowly but surely comes this intenseness of the desire for contact, direct private contact. So they'll move people off into a private chat, maybe using an encrypted chat app such as a WhatsApp or something else, where they can just go one-on-one. And then that's where they set their hooks into these victims, sadly. They set their hooks by endearing themselves in the most emotional, personal connections. But always, without a doubt, it always comes with this ask for money under a variety of circumstances.
How much research does a scammer do before they decide to engage with somebody? Because it's not like, I would imagine they're not just flipping through Tinder or Match.com and going, oh, that looks like somebody that I could sucker into this. Like they're doing a fair amount of background before they choose to engage, right?
They are, in fact, when we think about how much we share about ourselves online. And people sometimes worry about how much the government has access to your private and personal information. But think about how much people put out about themselves online on these various apps, be it social media apps, the dating apps, what have you, even down to the hourly activities of here's my location now, here's what I just ate for dinner, here's pictures of me and my best friend, here are pictures of me and my family members, here's my pet, here's my pet's name. All of these things that can be used to craft this approach, this recruitment, this spotting and assessing of people so that they can be victimized with this expertise of a con artist that could not be more genuine, more sincere when they approach these people, or at least they feel they are. And it goes badly from there.
So help me understand, though, how a con artist would use that personal information to gain a connection.
Well, just think about the interest that you express online. I like Labradors. I go to the beach all the time. I go to a bar up here called Lefties all the time. I play this sport. I follow this sports team. Well, as you're putting that out there, these people are seeing that, especially if you're doing it in a public setting without any privacy restrictions, so almost anybody can see this. And you're putting more and more detail behind that. Well, what are they doing? They're collecting that so that they can come up with their backstory, craft their approach to you to say, oh, wait, I like the Boston Red Sox too. Oh, I love dogs as well. Holy cow, I love horseback riding. That's my favorite activity, and my favorite place to vacation is on this island in the Bahamas. All of that creates that connection, that human connection that these people are looking for when sometimes they're using these dating apps. And again, that's not to say these dating apps are all bad in any way, shape, or form. They do foment a lot of real substantive relationships. My wife and I have many friends that met their spouses through online dating apps. So there's nothing wrong with them. But at the same time, just as they can be used for these, legitimate purposes, these good purposes, the criminals are waiting in the wings to abuse them.
So where does it go from there? I mean, it starts off with that conversation and maybe some connection over mutual interests that are feigned because of what somebody has posted or shared themselves. Um, is there a relatively typical timeline in which the scam proceeds? Is it a couple of weeks? Is it a couple of months? Do people play the long game and do this for a year and a half?
Well, if you think about confidence scams, right, and confidence or cons, that comes from a term that was actually coined here in the United States back in the 19th century. And there are things called the short con. When you think about a short con, think about three-card Monte. If you've ever walked in a major city and you see a card game on the side of the road, that three-card Monte, that's a short con because there's an immediate attempt to hook you in and get your money. These are more medium to long-term cons where they can take weeks, they can take months, and arguably with even all the more efforts that we do, be it in law enforcement, be it with the Better Business Bureau or AARP about public service awareness, well, then the con artists are adjusting that to lengthen, if they need to, their con, to give it more time to set those hooks even more deeply into people. So perhaps what started once is in terms of weeks to establish that connection, maybe now takes longer and longer. But again, these con artists have nothing to lose. They have all the time in the world to really select their prey, so to speak, and really put their hooks into them.
And it used to be, you know, I think in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a lot of cases with catfishing, I think is the right term, where basically a con artist is stealing somebody else's identity, creating a whole nother persona using other people's photos and videos and their lives. Is that still the predominant con today, or have the cons evolved to where there's a real human on the other side? Because even the least savvy person when it comes to digital media is going to ask for a FaceTime at some point or a Zoom call, something where you can see and talk to them and interact with them.
Let's take it from this point. I mean, this type of con, this romance scam, has been evolving for literally hundreds of years. So you can go back to the 16th century and learn about what's called the Spanish prisoner, which was an in-person romance scam that was done back then. You fast forward today to where we've been online, and that aspect of anonymity was able to be portrayed, where you could put up a picture of anybody and write that email, write that text, write that chat. No one really knows who you are. I think we're in the moment right now where we're seeing the evolution of that because people are becoming aware of the risk. Yet, people are still very much desiring to meet that either Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whomever that they're desperate to have that connection with. So I think we're in this period of evolution where we're going to start seeing more and more humans actually on live chat and the like. And if you can take examples from popular culture right now, there's a Netflix series very popular called The Tinder Swindler, which started out as an online romance scam, essentially, but quickly morphed into an in-person scam. So it shows you this will evolve, it will continue to evolve. But nevertheless, we say commonly in law enforcement, if everyone just had that extra dose of skepticism to give themselves a moment and really ask, okay, is this legitimate? Could this really be legitimate? Because it goes back to this old adage, right? If it seems too perfect, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And in many cases, if we could get people to just take that pause, that moment, and really look at this and think, wow, well, this just came off well too, crafted, and we have all these matches. Could this possibly be real? I would hope that if that extra dose of skepticism was there in today's current scams or tomorrow's scams of more in-person, online, face-to-face or video chat, what have you, perhaps we could, talk ourselves out of this business of having to combat romance scams.
It's so hard, though, because when you're talking about matters of the heart, I mean, love is blind, like that's a common phrase. And so when you think that someone has true affection for you, especially if they start sending physical, tangible things, like let's say they ask for your address and you give it to them and they start sending you gifts. Like that's, another step where there's this affirmation that there's a real person on the other end that cares for me enough to send something in the mail to me.
Well, and that's why we can't criticize these victims at all. And I think in law enforcement, we're certainly sensitized to it. We have to be very victim centric about these types of crimes because these people are so manipulated, but by such masters, masters of human emotion, masters of human sensibilities. And again, they're seeking, obviously that ultimate goal of money at the end, and they don't care about the personal emotional devastation that they cause somebody. But the fact remains that it's the subjects that are so masterful. It's not the victims that are pitiful at all. I think it is rightly thought of that everybody wants to have human connection. Everybody wants to think that they can find that right person, that soul connection, whether it be through online purposes or not. So we really have to make sure that we pay attention to who these subjects are and what they're doing, and not focus on, the victims in any kind of pity way. We should really be focused on who these subjects are.
I would like to talk more about the subjects in just a moment. I would love to get your insight though on the victimology a little bit, on the demographics and basically what the cases that the FBI has taken in, what that has shown about the people who fall victim to these kind of scams.
We see it can run the gamut of all ages and types. However, predominantly, often we see in the age bracket of 40 to 49. We saw more women than men oftentimes. I can't give you any demographics in terms of level of education or occupation or work history, but we know that it runs everywhere, that we have extremely well-educated folks, extremely what you would think to be very computer literate, online literate, social media savvy, and then perhaps people that are less so. In the end, though, it's the ability for these criminals to really weed out who they think they can fool the best with whatever story it is they concoct. It really speaks to the numbers that we talked about before. The fact that we had over 24,000 complaints in 2021 alone, knowing that that is an underreported number when we really think about what the actual number probably is out there. In the state of Oregon alone, we had approximately 361 victims last year with a loss amount of $12 million or approximately thereof. But again, we know that that's an underreporting because there is such embarrassment. There is, there's such a personal, emotional aspect to this. And I'm not surprised at all that people don't want to report this to law enforcement sometimes.
Well, and I wanted to clarify the numbers that you were stating before about Tinder complaints and Match.com complaints. Those were relatively low because those were complaints that were filed in Oregon with the Portland office or somewhere in Oregon.
So we have numbers for Oregon. I think the numbers I gave you before are actually numbers nationally, because sometimes we don't actually necessarily get the actual dating app or the website app that it started with. And again, I'm not trying to focus on the actual apps themselves because I don't want to take anything away from them.
Right.
These are all legitimate apps that have a legitimate purpose and have good things happen on them for people.
Let's talk a little bit, as you were saying, on the perpetrators. I would love to know more about these perpetrators, the scammers that are behind all of this. Does the FBI have knowledge that these folks are operating domestically? Are they operating internationally? What do we know about romance scammers?
So we had seen in the past years a lot of subjects that were operating from overseas, targeting people domestically. When we look at our international complaints and where they're originating from, we see countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, France. But we also see a lot of complaints that resolve back to Africa as well. When we think about the romance scams of today, the internet dating romance scams, they are in some part an evolution of what we used to call the Nigerian letter fraud scams, where you would receive that letter of a Nigerian prince wanting to have his money released if you only sent him the processing fee for it, and then you would both be rich. So we see it from all angles, but certainly there's no shortage, I'm sure, of domestic individuals, people here in the United States, that are also taking advantage, sadly, of people on these sites.
And ultimately, the goal of these scammers is to try and get money from their victims. And it's interesting because I don't think the victims are always well off. I mean, they're often just, regular, like middle class folks. But what are the complications in terms of the money and how it all plays out? Is there a series of deposits that are made, checks that are cashed? Is there a money laundering aspect to all of this as well?
There is. The scam of yesterday certainly involved bank transfers, wire transfers, checks, depositing into actual accounts, opening of new accounts, be it in personal name or business names and the like. Again, you could have a loss amount of as low as, let's say, maybe a couple of $1,000, $4,000 or $5,000 from somebody. But to that person that doesn't have $4,000 or $5,000, that's ruinous, right, to their entire situation. Tomorrow's scam, and what we're seeing it evolve to right now, is called cryptocurrency scams, where we're seeing this shift from gaining that endearing quality between themselves, building up this relationship, and then switching it into a cryptocurrency investment fraud. There's a phrase for it. It's fairly crude, but we use it all the time. It's called pig butchering, where they will fatten up a cryptocurrency investment account. They will slowly get this person to invest more and more in this cryptocurrency with the notation that, we are in this together. We're going to be so well off after this. This is going to be so fantastic. Convincing them slowly but surely to invest more and more in this cryptocurrency account. And then as they fatten up that account, or as if you would fatten up a pig before slaughter, and then they quickly and quietly remove all the cryptocurrency from that account, and the person is left with nothing, and the person is long gone. The subject is long gone. So again, tomorrow's scams, we're going to continue to see the increased utilization of cryptocurrency. But as I've noted, we've evolved from yesteryear of checks, bank transfers, wire transfers, to now this cryptocurrency, which is becoming even more difficult for people.
Well, because if I put my scammer hat on, the cryptocurrency, I would imagine, is harder to trace and doesn't invite, the scrutiny as much as bank transactions would, right?
Well, here's the difference, and that's a great point. When you have bank transfers, especially when we get over amounts of $10,000, the bank is triggered to send an alert, right? When we have checks over $10,000, wire transfers over $10,000. When we have cryptocurrency movements of $10,000, there is no banking authority or anything that is catching that unless that amount is coming out of your accounts or into your accounts. You have to rely on your personal bank to catch that. But inside the cryptocurrency world, there is no regulatory authority that's catching that amount and saying, hey, wait a second, this may be a fraud. Let's hold on this, or let's make this SAR, a suspicious activity transaction report, and notify the authorities so that they're looking at this as well.
That lack of oversight would be really inviting for the scammers, I would imagine. Let's talk about, in the few minutes that we have left here, intervention. If you have a loved one, a family friend, someone that you know who thankfully has said something to you about their new relationship and what's happening, how do you have that conversation with a successful outcome?
Great question. And let me back it up even before that. For anybody that's listening that may be concerned about being victimized by something like this, we stress with all the importance that we can to have conversations with your family members about online relationships that you have that maybe are new or evolving and that you aren't too certain about. Because maybe that family member is going to be the person to alert you or sound the alarm, or at least flag for you, wait, this doesn't sound that legitimate. This sounds too good to be true. That adage applies to this whole situation as it does for so many other situations. But let's say you're on the other side of the coin, and we constantly preach a couple of things. First, really, you need to be careful about what you post online. It's not to say that you shouldn't be personal, you shouldn't be vulnerable, but you really have to be careful with who you're posting it to. If you have your settings on your social media apps open for all the public to see, well, all the public can see that, as well as those scammers out there. And they're looking for exactly that information to take advantage of you. When you perhaps get that request with just a photo and a name and you're not totally sure, there are plenty of search engines that you can right-click on that photo, search that photo, save that photo, and then search that photo and that name on any number of websites these days to see if they have been out there using that same photo or that same name to scam other people. Again, I think I mentioned early on in the program, the AARP, the Better Business Bureau, the FTC, the FBI's IC3.gov website all have public service announcements and advice when it comes to making sure that we're putting that out there for people to research. If, again, you feel that you're going down this path and it is legitimate, nevertheless, take it slowly. Ask a lot of questions. You would do that in person. Why wouldn't you do it online? It should not go any faster than if you were in person. And in fact, if you're online and you've never met this person, it should cause you to want to ask even more questions and go even more slowly. When we have a situation of somebody that perhaps we've never met online and you've had opportunities to, and every time they come up with an excuse, well, that's a big red flag, because if you are in this deep emotional connection relationship with that person, but you've been supposed to have met online or in person any number of times, and every single time there's an excuse, well, that's a huge red flag there that people really should be thinking about. We should also make sure people understand you need to beware if somebody that you start that online relationship with starts trying to isolate you from your friends, your other friends, your family members, starts really trying to cut you off from your normal connections. They're doing so because they don't want you to go to these other people asking questions. Hey, do you really think this is a legitimate relationship? Do you really think that this could be, the one? And then, of course, as I said many times, always, this will come with some ask for money. As I said before, it may have been in the form of bank transfers, wire transfers, opening new bank accounts. There's also this aspect of asking for gift cards, which we saw a lot of. Again, it can run the gamut where the individual poses as a member of the U.S. military or some trade occupation based overseas. But in any case, there is always some ask for money under some usually urgent set of circumstances. And then that could evolve into what I talked about just before, that investment fraud scam with cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and there's usually an emotional ask there too, with the urgency of needing to get home because they have a sick kid and they don't have the resources to get home, or just something super emotional like that. Wow, this is fascinating stuff, the crypto stuff especially, because that's sort of the new evolution of where this is all going. Any last thoughts before we leave you?
Bottom line, unless you're doing business with a company or a known company that you would getting a service from or product from, you should never send money to somebody online that you've never met in person. There is just really almost no reason for that, unless it's a legitimate charity that you've researched or a company that you're buying a product or service from. You should never, ever send money to somebody that you've never met in person.
All right. Special Agent in Charge Kieran Ramsey with Portland, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a real pleasure, Anna. Thank you so much.
That was a lot to cover. We will create a tip sheet based on the key points that the Special Agent in Charge shared with us during that episode. He had some valuable information that I do hope you will share with your circle of family and friends, because, again, you just don't know who it is out there that needs to hear this information. Check out thatexpertshow.com. That's where we'll post the tip sheet. We'll also put this episode on YouTube on our channel where we have all of our previous episodes if you want to check that out. We have a previous episode on military romance scams specifically that has been highly watched. I think it's got like 22,000 views, so that's worth checking out as well. If you would rather listen to us as a podcast, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I do love to hear from you. I'd love to get your messages and your ideas about the topics and guests that we should go after. Reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search for Anna Canzano. Always love your feedback and your dialogue and your questions for our upcoming guests. That's really what makes That Expert Show work, because you are part of the process. We are on Monday nights in partnership with The Oregonian, and it is That Expert Show where you help run the show.